Of a historical overview. So these are constitutions of modern Egypt. So the first constitution of modern Egypt was in 1923. That was under the monarchy. And in that, because I'm going to give the context of some of the articles which still appear in the newest constitutions. Article 149 identified Islam as the religion of the state and Arabic as the official language. In 1956, when the monarchy was overthrown through a coup or revolution, depending on your ideological standpoint, what happened was, a new constitution was drafted in 1956, and Egypt was, in the Article 1, Egypt was declared an Arab state, so that's very important, an Egyptian people part of the Arab nation. 1958, there was the Egypt, very short-lived Egypt-Syria Union, new constitution, so called for a new constitution, for the first time, and this is the only constitution, so, very, very important. This was the only constitution in Egypt's history where Article 2 about Arabic being the official language and Islam being the official language of the state is not there. Right, and Egypt became known as the United Arab Republic. Syria left the Union in 1962 because they had a coup there. That resulted in a constitutional declaration, and then yet another constitution in 1964. It was a provisional constitution. It emphasized the socialist character of Egypt, of the Egyptian state. 1971, the permanent Egyptian constitution. So Sadat came along the scene and said, we've had so many temporary constitutions, it's time to have a permanent constitution for Egypt. Egypt became known as the Arab Republic of Egypt. And even though the constitution was amended in 1980, in 2005, and 2007, it was still kind of known as the 1971 permanent constitution. And that's why I included it in my analysis, because it was the constitution which remained essentially in effect until 2011. Right, so in 2011, after the uprising, what happened was the constitution was suspended. There was a lot of debate about Articles 1 and 2, which identify Arabic as the official language and Islam as the religion of the state. A lot of heated debate, but in the end, there was a kind of like a brief constitution. The preamble was taken out, and that went for a referendum. It was reinstated as a kind of like a temporary provisional constitution. 2012, and we've already listened to another presentation today about the controversy which surrounded this constitution, so I'm not going to go into detail, but it was passed under the Muslim Brotherhood rule of Muslim Brotherhood President Mohammed Morsi in 2012, who was overthrown in 2013, and then under military control and a provisional interim president, Ali Mansour, we had yet another constitution in 2014. So the main premise of my analysis is going to be between the last two constitutions, although I will also kind of use the 1971 constitution as a kind of point of departure for the comparison. Okay, so let me start first of all by talking about the preamble, because the preamble is quite important in the constitutions. So in the 1971 constitution, which was drafted at a time when pan-Arab sentiments were still quite high, that was before the Camp David resolution, bear in mind that was at the beginning of Sadat's time in office. Unity is the aspiration of the Arab nation, and I am sorry that the next few slides are going to be text heavy. I just want you to have text in front of you. These are translations, of course. Yes, so emphasizing the Arab character of the nation. The 2012 constitution kind of mirrors that a little bit, changes it a little bit, but it's still there, more or less, okay? But it's absent from the 2014 constitution. Religious identity in the preamble, that's not present at all in the 1971 constitution, right? So there's no talk of any religious identity in the preamble. But in the 2012 constitution, there is talk of how the noble Azhar, so Al-Azhar, has been throughout its history a mainstay for the nation's identity. So that's quite important because they're linking Egyptian identity with Al-Azhar, which is an Islamic institution. Described as a custodian of the immortal Arabic language. So, this is first mention of language beyond the Article 2. And the noble Islamic Sharia, okay? So, Azhar, custodian of the identity of the Egyptian people, of Arabic language, and of Islamic Sharia. In 2014, there's explicit mention of the 3 Abrahamic religions, so Egypt is the cradle and belief and banner of glory of revealed religions, and asserts the principles of Sharia law as the principal source of legislation, which was present before, but refers for the first time to a civil government, Hukuma Madaniya. And for those of you who have been following Middle Eastern studies, of course, the term Madaniya is a contested term. I don't have time to go into that particular. If we have time at the end, I can perhaps address that in the Q&A. Okay, but yes, for a lot of people, Madaniya can actually mean secular. Okay, and yeah, so going to Article 1. So Article 1, like I said, it was there before, in a sense. It has been altered a little bit in 2012. So it's not just that Arab Republic of Egypt is dependent sovereign and all of that, independent sovereign and all of that, but the Egyptian people, not only part of the Arab world, right? The Arab nation, Ummah, they are part of Al-Ummatayn Al-Arabiyya Wal-Islamiyya, so the Arab and Islamic nations, and that's quite significant. 2014 constitution, which I should say followed more or less the template, same template of the 2012 constitution, but changed some parts significantly, which makes the comparison even more interesting. What happens is that the Egyptian people become part of the Arab nation, seek its integration and unity, but Egypt is part of the Islamic world. So rather than the Islamic nation, Al-Ummah Al-Islamiyya, a very symbolically loaded term in Arabic, it's not part of Al-Ummah Al-Islamiyya, it's part of Al-Alam Al-Islami. Very different symbolic connotations. Right, Article 2, it's the same in the 3 constitutions. Okay, so that hasn't been touched. And the reason it hasn't been touched probably is because of the amount of controversy it generated, particularly in the debates in 2011 and 2012. So Arabic is still the official language, and principles of Islamic Sharia are still the principal source of legislation. Interestingly, the addition of the principles of Islamic Sharia as the principal source of legislation was something that was added in the 1971 Constitution under Sadat. So rather than Islam is the official language, there is the introduction of Islamic Sharia. Again, don't have time to go into the context of that, but that's something interesting to look at separately. What happens in 2012, however, and that's one of the reasons that the Muslim Brotherhood government came under attack, is that they controversially sought to define what the principles of Islamic Sharia are. So they said they include general evidence, adilla kulliya, foundational rules of jurisprudence, so adilla قواعد فقهية, قواعد أصولية, and the credible sources of accepted Sunni doctrines, al-madahib. So all of these very, very technical terms, which actually wouldn't be understood by anyone other than specialists working within Islamic studies, have been inserted there. Sorry, I don't have time to go into the context again, but that generated a lot of controversy. So it's not just the principle of Islamic Sharia, which can be understood differently by people in the legal system. They actually wanted to pin it down to something. Okay. Finally, language, which is really the main part that I'm interested in. You'll notice that 1971 is not on that. That's the reason for that is that language doesn't actually get any specific mention apart from its mention in Article 2. So it's identified, the Arabic language is identified as the official language, but doesn't get any more mention. 2012, on the other hand, 2012 Constitution introduced so many articles that language played a pivotal part in. So in Article 4, where Al-Azhar was granted religious authority and assigned with the responsibility to spread Islamic da'wah and the disciplines of religion and the Arabic language, so they also, again, kind of linked to being an authority in Arabic language in Egypt and the world. And in Article 12, the state shall safeguard the cultural and linguistic constituents of society and foster the Arabicization of education, ta'rib al-ta'lim, science and knowledge. And then Article 60, Arabic language is a core subject in various stages of education, all educational institutions, and the religious studies and national history are core stages. So lots of mentions of language. Now, like I said, the 2014 more or less followed the same template, but there were significant changes. So you'll notice that some of these articles still there, but they have been kind of drowned, watered down. So Al-Azhar, custodian of religion and the Arabic language, but that's it. The state shall encourage translation from and into Arabic, very, translation, not the same thing as Arabicization, so ta'rib and tarjama, for those of you who are very, very different. The Arabic language, religious education, national history, including all its periods, are core subjects in public and private pre-university education. So Arabic is a core subject in pre-university education, whereas in 2012, the Constitution sought to make it a mandatory subject in all levels of education. So that would, presumably also include university education, okay? So again, that emphasis has been taken out. Right, and 2012 also included a couple of articles which had no counterpart in 2015. So Article 2015 assigns the National Media Council with the responsibility to establish standards and regulations to ensure commitment of various media to the principles of ethics, professions, and also safeguarding the Arabic language. So now, Arabic in the media as well as Arabic language, we should have standards for Arabic language in the media. That wasn't there. And then in 59, Article 59, University, Scientific and Language Academies, so language academies are being mentioned, shall be assigned a sufficient percentage of the gross national product. So, special funding for language academies. Again, that's not there. So that really concludes the focus on language. Identity. Egyptian identity in the 2014 Constitution. So I've already talked about, the Arab and Islamic identity in 2012 Constitution. 2014 Constitution, on the other hand, the word huwiyya itself is actually mentioned. So in 2012, it was only mentioned when it was linked to Al-Azhar. In 2014, it is mentioned, there's actually a whole chapter in the Constitution on preserving the cultural constituents of Egyptian identity. And these are identified in terms of diverse civilizational components, also in terms of, in Article 50, Egypt's civilization cultural heritage, which includes all its major periods, so ancient Egyptian, Coptic, and Islamic. And this is the first time that ancient Egyptian components, Coptic components, are mentioned in terms of Islamic identity. And finally, so cultural pluralism. So we talk about diversity and pluralism in terms of defining Egypt's identity. Sorry, skipped one. So to summarize, so the 1971 Constitution, there was, like I said, emphasis on Arab character, made sense in terms of its historical context, and then Arabic language named official language, but didn't receive any specific mention after that. What is interesting, however, in the 2012 Constitution is that there is even more emphasis on the Arab identity of Egypt than what we had in the 1971 Constitution, even though they might argue that pan-Arab nationalism is not that salient anymore. So I would argue that this can only be explained in terms of the fact that Arab nationalism and Islamic nationalism can be reconciled by the fact that Arabic is valued in both of them. So Suleiman, I think, famously argues that they are not in conflict. They do not contradict each other because Islamic nationalism can imperceptibly fade into Arab nationalism. I argue it's actually the other way around now. So what's happening is that this Arab nationalism fades into what is like a greater cause here, which is Islamic nationalism. Or Islamic identity, I shouldn't say nationalism. Right, so just to sum up. Sorry, my notes, sum up here. Yes. Right, yes, so basically, 2014 Constitution, on the other hand, in attempting you had a government which was actively seeking to distance itself from the Muslim Brotherhood government. And in doing so, they were trying to distance themselves from the symbols of that. So, that Islamic identity which was touted by the Muslim Brotherhood. Because you can't distance yourself from an ideology without distancing yourself from its symbols. And language in this case, was a very important symbol. Because language here wasn't really the instrumental function of the Arabic language that the Muslim Brotherhood's constitution was trying to preserve, but rather the symbolic function of the Arabic language as a marker of that identity, I argue. Hence the watered down Arabic belonging, hence the less removed emphasis on the role of the Arabic language, and hence the reference to this Egyptian identity, which is defined in terms of pluralism and diversity. Significant why? So I've already kind of touched on this. but it's also quite significant in terms of language politics, because I argue now that if we're really looking for a binary, if there must be a binary in language politics, it's no longer in terms of pan-Arab nationalism versus Egyptian nationalism, but what has come to be identified as Egyptian identity versus Islamic identity. And that is also quite significant in terms of language politics, because the conservative political right has traditionally been a proponent of standard language ideology because it legitimizes its position. Now that they are seeking to distance themselves from it, what does this paradox entail for the future of language politics in Egypt? Thank you.
Thank you.